right, we ready? For president, 3 for Kamala Harris, 3 for Donald Trump. Following the national trend. For governor, 1 for Joyce Craig and 5 for Mary Ayotte. And for representative Congress, 4 for Maggie Goodlander and 2 for Lily Tang Williams. For executive counselor, we had 1 for Emmett Soledadi and 5 for Joe Kennedy. And for state senator, 1 for Rusty Talbot and 5 for David Rochefort. And all the rest of the races, there were no contests with 6 votes for each candidate. And the constitutional question, yes, 4, and no, 1. That's it. Thank you for coming.
Hi. Could I speak to you quickly?
Quickly?
On the record?
On the record? I don't know. Depends what you're going to ask me.
Oh, I'm just...
Who are you?
I'm Charlotte Hampton. I'm a reporter for the Dartmouth newspaper.
Okay.
Yeah, are you okay speaking on the record?
Sure.
Can I use your name? Okay.
Yes.
What's your name?
Scott Maxwell. Maxwell.
What do you think about the results?
It was a surprise. I knew who my wife was voting for. The others, I really wasn't sure. So.
Or you think it's
Well, no, because you just don't know. Back in the primary, all 6 of us voted for Nikki Haley.
right.
And unfortunately, she wasn't on the ballot. But
Right.
yeah, it's.
Did you think that you guys would all lean Democrat or Republican, or?
You know what? I really didn't know. The bulk of us are registered Republican.
Right.
You never know how things can work.
Right. And then before I let you go, can you just tell me a little bit about your experience with this tradition? Have you lived here for a long time?
3.5 years. So the first time I voted was in the primary in January.
Oh, so what's
this
it been like? Is it overwhelming?
When you put a camera in my face, yeah, a little bit, but no, it's been overwhelming. It's a good word. So, I feel like my vote doesn't count more than your vote or anyone else's vote. You just happen to get to go first.
Right. Why do you think there's this celebration? Do you think it's good that there's so much energy around the civic process, or do you?
No, it definitely matters. It does.
Tell me more about that. Thank you so
I'm
much.
just happy to get to this point.
Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Scott Maxwell, Maxwell. You're welcome.
That's a 3-time world champion or but it just national anthem. And now that it's midnight, the voting is beginning in this village. We are in the living room, beautiful home in Dixon Mansion, where the Boston's Resort, which is currently refurbished. So this home is for tonight, precinct. Actually, allows very small communities ask for the home precincts and to ask them to test the voting to happen early. This time, it's so much, right now, you can see the voting in the box. This town, the whole town is these living room right now, that's 6 people, 6 registered voters in Dixville, New Hampshire. Casting the votes right now. 4 of these people are registered Republicans, 2 of them are undeclared. So what's allowed to be done in New Hampshire, very small towns, is you can cast your ballot first minute of election day, which it is right now. And these will be the first results. There will be 160 million votes cast in the United States, 80,000 or so votes cast in New Hampshire, but these will be the first 6 votes that will be cast right now. And they will announce the results. You can see the voting booth, which is the voting booth, American flag, and there's 3 booths. There are 6 people. Now, they have a pen, and you can approve not just the president. Governor, for the representative in Congress, for other local races, of course, most of the attention being paid to these 6 people to vote for the president of the United States. And I can tell you, Dixon National has been doing this since 1960. For 64 years, this is the 17th election where we've had midnight voting here in this hamlet in northern New Hampshire, about 15 miles away from the Canadian border. Other towns have done it in New Hampshire too. Another Virginia edition, and this is the longest continuity from 1960 until 2023. For 64 years, we've been casting early votes. In the past, we were the first votes casting on the election entirely. And now voting for us early in the United States, but these are the first votes cast on election day. And of course, they will be the first results. But all going to practice has been used since 1980 for election exoneration, which was harder. The sign for the Dixville match, New Hampshire First Nation, that's been used since 1980. So there's a lot of great customs going on here, great heritage, great history. There's a lot of really nice things going on the world. So that's about local history in this country that I can tell you much from. We have Republicans, Democrats, Independents, not just the 6 people who live here, but also members of us from all over the world and visitors from elsewhere in New Hampshire and in the United States who come to look at this. So it's ring the balance in the box, and I think they're all in the box. The town moderator who's standing next to it now, until it's in, people unlock the box, open it up, and then they start telling you, okay, you just see on the left here, there's a board. And that board is First Nation, for New Hampshire, 2024, and there's a vote for further on the board. There's a representative of New Hampshire Attorney General's office here. Those votes will be the first official votes for 2024 election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. I'm wondering if you guys will have any questions for me. There's so much pride in the Schumann members, not just among the 6 people from who live in the village of this match, but among members of the history of the village. I mean, those people from New Hampshire came out to the England, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, the 16 states of the country. I think funny, this unique part of this resort, of course, I was married in Boston, Resort, very beautiful ski resort. It's close to Little Island now, where refurbishment have more. They want to keep this tradition going. As I mentioned to you before, there are other towns, for example, Hearts Landing in New Hampshire is also at midnight during 20 years. They stopped it 4 years ago because of the COVID outbreak, and they haven't resumed it. But they did for a long time too. Sort of a town called Millsfield, New Hampshire. It's come out just continuous during pollution in 1960. And then it's water, 76, in the election, 80, Reagan against Carter. And then doing it continuously.
Supervisors advise that all registered voters have voted. They advise that all registered voters have voted. And according to New Hampshire law, we are now able to close the polls if the town so chooses. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
And all those in favor? I declare the polls are closed. We will now begin the counting.
Official counting.
It's empty.
Don't drop the box.
Try not to.
It'll hurt somebody.
Won't hurt the box, that's for sure.
One for Donald Trump, J.D. Vance. One for Kelly Ayotte. One for Lily Tang Williams. One for Joseph P. Kenny. One for David Roquefort. One for Arnold G. Davis. One for Keith L. Roberge. One for John McCormick. One for Suzanne Collins. One for Leon H. Rideout. One for Terry L. Peterson. One for Ray Gorman. And yes on the constitutional amendment question. One for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. One for Kelly Ayotte. One for Lily Tang Williams. One for Joseph D. Kenny. One for David Roquefort. One for Arnold G. Davis. One for Keith Roberge. One for John McCormick. One for Suzanne Collins. One for Leon H. Rideout. One for Terry L. Peterson. One for Ray Gorman. And another yes for the constitutional amendment question. One for, I never say her name right, I'm sorry, Kamala D. Harris. One for Tim Walz. One for Kelly Ayotte. One for Maggie Goodlander. One for Joseph D. Kenny. One for David Roquefort. One for Arnold G. Davis. One for Keith Roberge. One for John McCormick. One for Suzanne Collins. One for Leanne H. Rideout. One for Terry L. Peterson. One for Ray Gorman. And yes on the amendment question. One for Donald J. Trump and J.D. Vance. One for Kelly Ayotte. One for Maggie Goodlander. One for Joseph D. Kenny. One for David Roquefort. One for Arnold G. Davis. One for Keith L. Roberge. one for John McCormick, one for Suzanne Collins, one for Leon H. Rideout, one for Terry L. Peterson, one for Ray Gorman, and no for the constitutional amendment question. One for Kamala D. Harris and Tim Waltz, one for Joyce Craig, one for Maggie Goodlander, one for Emmett Soldati, one for Rusty Talbot, one for Arnold G. Davis, one for Keith L. Roberge, one for John McCormick, one for Suzanne Collins, one for Leon H. Rideout, one for Terry L. Peterson, one for Ray Gorman. And we have an under, is that an undervote? And one undervote. One for Kamala D. Harris and Tim Walz, one for Kelly Ayotte, one for Maggie Goodlander, one for Joseph G. Kenny, one for David Oakport, one for Arnold G. Davis, one for Keith L. Roberge, one for John McCormick, one for Suzanne Collins, one for Leon H. Rideout, one for Terry L. Peterson, one for Ray Gorman, and yes on the amendment question.
We have the results. Yes, we do. All right, we're ready. For president, 3 for Kamala Harris, 3 for Donald Trump. Following the national trend. For governor, 1 for Joyce Craig and 5 for Kelly Ayotte. And for representative of Congress, 4 for Maggie Goodlander and 2 for Lily Tang Williams. Nope, that's it. For anyone that's interested, for executive counselor, we had 1 for Emmett Soledati and 5 for Joe Kennedy. And for state senator, 1 for Rusty Talbot and 5 for David Rochefort. And all the rest of the races, there were no contests with 6 votes for each candidate. And the constitutional question, yes, 4, and no 1. That's it. Thank you for coming.
Hi. Could I speak to you quickly?
Quickly.
On the record?
On the record, I don't know. Depends what you're going to ask me.
Oh, I'm just,
Who are you?
I'm Charlotte Hampton. I'm a reporter for the Dartmouth newspaper.
Okay.
Yeah, are you okay speaking on the record?
Sure.
Can I use your name? Okay.
Yes.
What's your name?
Scott Maxwell. Maxwell.
What do you think about the results?
It was a surprise. I knew who my wife was voting for. The others, I really wasn't sure. So.
Or is it just
Well, no, because you just don't know. Back in the primary, all 6 of us voted for Nikki Haley.
right,
And unfortunately, she wasn't on the ballot. But
right.
yeah,
Did you think that you guys would all be Democrat or Republican or?
You know what? I really didn't know. The bulk of us are registered Republican.
Right.
You never know how things will work.
Right. And then before I let you go, can you just tell me a little bit about your experience with this tradition? Have you lived here for a long time?
3.5 years. So the first time I voted was in the primary in January.
Oh, so what's
this-
it been like? Is it overwhelming?
When you put a camera in my face, yeah, a little bit, but no, it's been overwhelming. It's a good word. I feel like my vote doesn't count more than your vote or anyone else's. We just happen to go first.
Right. Why do you think there's this celebration? Do you think it's good that there's so much energy around the civic process, or do you?
No, it definitely matters. It does.
Tell me more about that. Thank you so
I'm
much.
just happy to get to this point.
Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Scott Maxwell, Maxwell. You're welcome.
That's a few times it'll change before you play this first national anthem. And now that it's midnight, the voting is beginning in this village. You are in the living room, beautiful home in Dixon National Boston's resort, which is currently refurbished. So this home is for tonight. Precincts, actually allows very small communities ask for their own precincts and to ask them to test the voting to happen early. This time, it's so much, right now, you can see the voting in the box. This town, the whole town is in living room, and six registered voters in Dixon, New Hampshire, casting the votes right now. 4 of these people are registered Republicans, 2 of them are undeclared. So what's allowed to be done in New Hampshire, very small towns, is you can cast your ballot the first minute of election day, which it is right now. And these will be the first results. There will be 160 million votes cast in the United States, 80,000 or so votes cast in New Hampshire, but these will be the first 6 votes that will be cast right now. They're going to announce the results. You can see the voting is voting booth, which is the voting booth. American flags are there. There's 3 booths. There's 6 people. There's the ballots. There's a pen. And then you can choose not just the president, but the governor, or the representative. For other local races, the pension being paid 86 people to vote for the president of the United States. I can tell you Dixon National has been since 1960. For 64 years, this is the 17th election that we've had midnight voting here in this hamlet in northern New Hampshire, about 15 miles away from the Canadian border. Other towns have done it in New Hampshire too. And then we're doing this year. This is the longest count rule in 1960. Until 2024. 64 years of early votes. In the past, these were the first votes cast in the election entirely. And now they need to let the early one in the state, but these are the first votes cast on election day. And the first stage of official results. All going to track this out. It's been used since 1980. we've been nominated for heritage and Greek history. There's a lot of organized groups right now who are upset about local discourse in this country, but I can tell you much more, we have Republicans, Democrats, independents, not just the 6 people who live here, but also members of us from all over the world and visitors from elsewhere in the country and in the United States who come to look at this. So it's really the balance in the box, I think they're all in the box. The town moderator is sitting next to them now, until it's in, people come out of the box, open it up, and they start playing the tape. And just on the left here, there's a board. And that board is for termination, for New Hampshire, 2024, and the vote further on the board. There's a representative of New Hampshire for the general's opportunity. Those votes will be the first official votes for 2024 election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. I'm wondering if you guys will have any questions for me. There's so much pride in the Schumann members, not just among the 6 people from who live in the village of Match, but among members who used to live there. Because people from New Hampshire, from Massachusetts, it's a team of people, other people country. It's funny, the unique part of this resort, of course, in the Boston resort, very beautiful ski resort. It's supposed to be a while now, refurbishment. Open in 2 years. So the peak of the resort existence, there were more than 30 people from Ocean did so much. Now they're down to 6. Ultimately, when the resort reopens, they hope they have more. They want to keep this tradition going. As I mentioned to you before, there were other towns, for example, Hearts Landing in New Hampshire has also had midnight meetings for many years. They stopped 4 years ago because of the COVID outbreak, and they haven't resumed it. But they did for a long time too. Sort of a town called Millsfield. This one not just continue to evolution in 1960, the
Supervisors advise if all registered voters have voted. Been advised that all registered voters have voted. And according to New Hampshire law, we are now able to close the polls if the town so chooses. Do I hear a motion?
Yes.
So moved.
And all those in favor? I declare the polls are closed. We will now begin the counting. It's empty.
Don't drop the box.
Try not to.
It'll hurt somebody.
Won't hurt the box, that's for sure.
1 for Donald Trump, J.D. Vance. 1 for Kelly Ayotte. 1 for Lily Tang Williams. 1 for Joseph B. Kenny. 1 for David Roquefort. 1 for Arnold G. Davis. 1 for Keith L. Roberge. one for John McCormick,
4 Republicans here.
one for Suzanne Collins, one for Leon H. Rideout, one for Terry L. Peterson, one for Ray Gorman, and yes on the constitutional amendment question. One for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, one for Kelly Ayotte, one for Lily Tang Williams, one for Joseph D. Kenny, one for David Roquefort, one for Arnold G. Davis, one for Keith Roberge, one for John McCormick, one for Suzanne Collins, one for Leon H. Rideout, one for Terry L. Peterson, one for Ray Gorman, and another yes for the constitutional amendment question. One for, I never say her name right, I'm sorry, Kamala D. Harris, one for Tim Walz, one for Kelly Ayotte, one for Maggie Goodlander, one for Joseph D. Kenny, one for David Roquefort, one for Arnold G. Davis, one for Keith Roberge, one for John McCormick, one for Suzanne Collins, one for Leanne H. Rideout, one for Terry L. Peterson, one for Ray Gorman, and yes on the amendment question. One for Donald J. Trump and J.D. Vance, one for Kelly Ayotte, one for Maggie Goodlander, one for Joseph D. Kenny, one for David Roquefort, one for Arnold G. Davis, one for Keith L. Roberge, one for John McCormick, one for Suzanne Collins, one for Leon H. Rideout, one for Terry L. Peterson, one for Ray Gorman, and no for the constitutional amendment question. One for Kamala D. Harris and Tim Walz, one for Joyce Craig, one for Maggie Goodlander, one for Emmett Soldati, one for Rusty Talbot, one for Arnold G. Davis, one for Keith L. Roberge, one for John McCormick, one for Suzanne Collins, one for Leon H. Rideout, one for Terry L. Peterson, one for Ray Gorman, and we have an under, is that an undervote? And one undervote. One for Kamala D. Harris and Tim Walz, one for Kelly Ayotte, one for Maggie Goodlander, one for Joseph D. Kenny, one for David Roquefort, one for Arnold G. Davis, one for Keith L. Roberge, one for John McCormick, one for Suzanne Collins, one for Leon H. Rideout, one for Terry L. Peterson, one for Ray Gorman, and yes on the amendment question.
We have the results, yes, we do. All right, we're ready for president. 3 for Kamala Harris, 3 for Donald Trump. Following the national trend. For governor, 1 for Joyce Craig and 5 for Kelly Ayotte. Representative Congress, 4 for Maggie Goodlander, and 2 for Lily Tang Williams. Nope, that's it. For anyone that's interested, for executive counselor, we had 1 for Emmett Soledadi and 5 for Joe Kennedy. And for state senator, 1 for Rusty Talbot and 5 for David Rochefort. And all the rest of the races, there were no contests with 6 votes for each candidate. And the constitutional question, yes, 4, and no, 1. That's it. Thank you for coming.
Hi. Could I speak to you quickly?
Quickly.
On the record?
On the record, I don't know. Depends what you're going to ask me.
Oh, I'm just,
Who are you?
I'm Charlotte Hampton. I'm a reporter for the Dartmouth newspaper.
Okay.
Yeah, are you okay speaking on the record?
Sure.
Can I use your name? Okay.
Yes.
What's your name?
Scott Maxwell. Maxwell.
What do you think about the results?
It was a surprise. I knew who my wife was voting for. The others, I really wasn't sure. So,
Why was it a surprise?
well, no, because you just don't know. Back in the primary, all 6 of us voted for Nikki Haley,
Right,
and unfortunately, she wasn't on the ballot. But
right.
yeah, it's.
Did you think that you guys would all be Democrat or Republican or?
You know what? I really didn't know. The bulk of us are registered Republican.
Right.
You never know how things will work.
Right. And then before I let you go, can you just tell me a little bit about your experience with this tradition? Have you lived here for a long time?
3.5 years. So the first time I voted was in the primary in January.
Oh, so what's
this-
it been like? Is it overwhelming?
When you put a camera in my face, yeah, a little bit, but no, it's been overwhelming. It's a good day. So, I feel like my vote doesn't count more than your vote or anyone else's. We just happen to go first.
Right. Why do you think there's this celebration? Do you think it's good that there's so much energy around the civic process, or do you?
No, it definitely matters. It does.
Tell me more about that. Thank you so
I'm
much.
just happy to get to this point.
Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Scott Maxwell, Maxwell. You're welcome.
That's a 3-time motion according to what this first national anthem. And now that it's midnight, the voting is beginning in this village. We are in the living room. Beautiful home. Dixon National Boston's resort, which is currently refurbished. So this home is for tonight, precinct, actually allows very small communities, precincts, and to ask them to test the voting to have a this time, this time last year, right now, you can see the voting in the box. This town, the whole town is including one another. That's six registered voters in Dixon, New Hampshire, casting their votes right now. 4 of these people are registered Republicans, 2 of them are undeclared. So what's allowed to be done in New Hampshire, very small towns, is you can cast your ballot the first minute of election day, which it is right now. And these will be the first results. There will be 160 million votes cast in the United States, 80,000 or so votes cast in New Hampshire, but these will be the first 6 votes that will be cast right now. And then the results, you can see the voting booth, which is the voting booth, American flags are there, 3 booths, there are 6 people, they have ballots, they have a pen, and then you can just, not just the president, but the governor, for the representative in Congress, for other local races. For 64 years, this is the 17th election that we've had midnight voting here in this hamlet in northern New Hampshire, about 15 miles away from the Canadian border. Other towns have done it in New Hampshire too. Another Virginia tradition, and this is the longest town rule in 1960 until 2024. 64 years of casting early votes. In the past, the first was casting on the election entirely. And now many of us are early on in that state, but these are the first votes cast on election day. And of course, they will be the first results. All one of the practice stops has been used since 1980 for election promulgation, which will fighter. The sign for the Dixon National New Hampshire First Nation, that's been used since 1980. So there's a lot of great customs going on here, great heritage, great history. There's a lot of really nice things right now. So that's about local discourse in this country. I can tell you much more. We have Republicans, Democrats, Independents, not just the 6 people who live here, but also members of the from all over the world and visitors from elsewhere in the country and in the United States who come to look at this. So it's ring the balance in the box, and I think they're all in the box. The town lottery that we're sending next to it now, until it's in, people unlock the box, open it up, and then it's up, and the table. You can see on the left here, there's a board. And that board is First Nation, State of New Hampshire, 2024, and the vote, the vote on the board, there's a representative of New Hampshire from the General's office here. Those votes will be the first official votes for 2024 election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. I'm wondering if you guys will see if you have any questions for me. There's so much pride in the human language. I just know the 6 people who live in the village in this match. But there's no history of it. I mean, because we could be New Hampshire and not to the Union or that. The 16 years future. Funny, this unique part of this resort, unfortunately, was Boston resort. Very good resort. It's close to a little while now. Refurbishment will reopen in 2 years. So the peak of the resort's existence, there were more than 30 people who lived in this so much. Now they're down to 6. Ultimately, when the resort reopens, they hope they have more. They want to keep this tradition going. As I mentioned to you before, there are other towns, for example, Hearts Landing in New Hampshire is also at midnight voting for 20 years. They stopped 4 years ago because of the COVID outbreak. one time too. Sort of town hall this year. Continue to improve.
The supervisors advise if all registered voters have voted. They're advised that all registered voters have voted. And according to New Hampshire law, we are now able to close the polls if the town so chooses. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
And all those in favor? I declare the polls are closed. We will now begin the counting.
Official counting.
It's empty.
Tom, don't drop the box.
Try not to.
It'll hurt somebody.
Won't hurt the box, that's for sure.
One for Donald Trump, JD Vance. One for Kelly Ayotte. One for Lily Tang Williams. One for Joseph B. Kenny. One for David Roquefort. One for Arnold G. Davis. One for Keith L. Roberge. One for John McCormick. One for Suzanne Collins. One for Leon H. Rideout. One for Terry L. Peterson. One for Ray Gorman. And yes on the constitutional amendment question. One for Donald Trump and JD Vance. One for Kelly Ayotte. One for Lily Tang Williams. One for Joseph B. Kenny. One for David Roquefort. One for Arnold G. Davis. One for Keith Roberge. One for John McCormick. One for Suzanne Collins. One for Leon H. Rideout. One for Terry L. Peterson. One for Ray Gorman. And another yes for the constitutional amendment question. One for, I never say her name right, I'm sorry, Kamala D. Harris. One for Tim Walz. One for Kelly Ayotte. One for Maggie Goodlander. One for Joseph D. Kenny. One for David Roquefort. One for Arnold G. Davis. One for Keith Roberge. One for John McCormick. One for Suzanne Collins. One for Leanne H. Rideout. One for Terry L. Peterson. One for Ray Gorman. And yes on the amendment question. One for Donald J. Trump and JD Vance. One for Kelly Ayotte. One for Maggie Goodlander. One for Joseph D. Kenny. One for David Roquefort. One for Arnold G. Davis. One for Keith L. Roberge. One for John McCormick. One for Suzanne Collins. One for Leon H. Rideout. One for Terry L. Peterson. One for Ray Gorman. And no for the constitutional amendment question. One for Kamala D. Harris and Tim Walz. One for Joyce Craig. One for Maggie Goodlander. One for Emmett Soldati. One for Rusty Talbot. One for Arnold G. Davis. One for Keith L. Roberge. One for John McCormick. One for Suzanne Collins. One for Leon H. Rideout. One for Terry L. Peterson. One for Ray Gorman. And we have an is that an undervote? And one undervote. One for Kamala D. Harris and Tim Walz. One for Kelly Ayotte. One for Maggie Goodlander. One for Joseph D. Kenny. One for David Oakport. One for Arnold G. Davis. One for Keith L. Roberge. One for John McCormick. One for Suzanne Collins. One for Leon H. Rideout. One for Terry L. Peterson. One for Ray Gorman. And yes on the amendment question.
We have the results. Yes, we do. All right, we're ready. For president, 3 for Kamala Harris, 3 for Donald Trump. Following the national trend. For governor, 1 for Joyce Craig and 5 for Kelly Ayotte. And for representative of Congress, 4 for Maggie Goodlander and 2 for Lily Tang Williams. Oh, that's it. For anyone that's interested, for executive counselor, we had 1 for Emmett Soledati and 5 for Joe Kennedy. And for state senator, 1 for Rusty Talbot and 5 for David Rochefort. And all the rest of the races, there were no contests with 6 votes for each candidate. And the constitutional question, yes, 4, and no 1. That's it. Thank you for coming.
Hi. Could I speak to you quickly?
Quickly.
On the record?
On the record, I don't know. Depends what you're going to ask me.
Oh, I'm just,
Who are you?
I'm Charlotte Hampton. I'm a reporter for the Dartmouth newspaper.
Okay.
Yeah, are you okay speaking on the record?
Sure.
Can I use your name? Okay.
Yes.
What's your name?
Scott Maxwell. MAX.
For the issue of abortion and the right to choose. Of course, the woman's body is her choice. But when you're having women that are supporting Kamala Harris going in the streets, bouncing their, banging on the drums and actually doing some kind of ritualistic call, actually promoting abortion and killing life, like it's some kind of a party and celebration, that's an abomination. And you also have people like Jennifer Lopez, who's connected with P. Diddy on those underage sex tapes. You have Cardi B, a prostitute.
That's a very interesting point that you've made, because I do you think that the kind of endorsements we've seen from Hollywood biggies like a Beyonce or even a Jennifer Lopez, is this going to really work in the favor of a Kamala Harris, or could this really backfire given the kind of controversy we've seen sort of snowball after the entire P. Diddy scandal?
So here's what I think will happen. I think what's happening is a complete cultural phenomenon, a complete culture war. If this is continued to continue unchecked, we're going to see conservative values that hold together a family structure, good values, be overtaken by I'm sorry to say, disgusting values. And it's going to be the continual toxic degeneration of our society, where children are going to be taught that, being inappropriate and not holding on to their sexuality and their personal, their body, their choice. Okay, it's absolutely right. But for them to flaunt things that are inappropriate to become a norm, and you're going to see bad role models continue to influence our nation's youth. And I think that's precisely what the Kamala Harris campaign, with her endorsements and who she chose to have endorse her, is saying. And you can say all you want about Trump and having that comedian who got on stage and made a comment about Puerto Rico being a floating, island of garbage. It actually is. Puerto Rico has a massive garbage issue. He wasn't referring to the people, the Puerto Ricans themselves. And I think that Trump did come out and condemn that statement and make sure that people knew that he wasn't referring to the Puerto Rican people, but the media went ahead and lied. And he even came out and dressed up.
All right, Adele, I think I would like to bring in Taryn on that note. I'm sure she'd want to come up with a rebuttal to that. Taryn, I think some very strong views being put out there. Would you like to come in?
Yeah, so many different things that were atrocious about everything you said. Starting with the fact that the worst role model on earth for our children is Donald Trump. From everything he has said about women, from every disgusting thing he has said about women, he makes my skin crawl that my children have ever heard. The disgusting things he said. I will tell you, he spoke for over an hour and a half at his rally yesterday. He called every woman stupid, including Kamala Harris. There is nothing wrong with debating your opponents, but you cannot sit there and resort to third grade name calling. And in fact, I think third graders might come up with more intelligent arguments to debate policy than that man. It is despicable and disdainful that the leader of our free world would resort to name calling, making up names.
All right. I'm afraid I'm running short of time right now, so we'll have to close the discussion over there. Many thanks to you, Dr. Sampath, Adele, and of course, Chad and Taryn for joining in on this discussion. And in fact, I'm just going to end by saying that, may the best man or woman win. On that note, let's try and get in a pulse of what the American voter is looking for. And I'm joined by Brian Abel, who's joining me live from DC, CNN's Brian Abel. Thank you so much for joining in. First of all, I'd like to know from you the kind of preparations that are being made now. We are just hours away from polling day, and how will this shape up? Give our viewers a sense of why is the American voting system so unique.
Well, it's pretty unique in terms of it not being a popular vote, right? It's an electoral college. So what we are trying to do here, what the campaigns are trying to do, rather, is get that 270 electoral votes that are needed to become the next president here at the White House. And with this race being so close, too close to call, really, it's anybody's say as to what's going to happen tomorrow night.
How do you weigh in on the swing states, the kind of role they'll play in for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, whether you look at Pennsylvania or even the Sunbelt states?
Yeah, and Michigan as well, where I'm from, these battleground states, they're critically important. That's why you've seen both of these campaigns over the weekend crisscrossing them from Georgia, North Carolina, those Sunbelt battleground states, Arizona, Nevada, and then also the Great Lakes region of Wisconsin, the blue wall, if you will, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Those are critical because historically Democrats have cleared all three of those battleground blue wall states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, but they did swing back to Trump in 2016 and then back again for Biden in 2020. So we will see what happens this time around.
Brian, how do you compare the campaign styles of Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris? Of course, we've seen how Donald Trump has, in fact, resorted to a lot of rallies, whereas Kamala Harris has kept it more personal, focusing on, go out there, step out and cast your vote.
Yeah, two very distinctly different styles. One's a bit darker, one's a bit more looking forward, if you will, with Vice President Harris's campaign versus Donald Trump's, with some of the rhetoric that we've seen in the last handful of days, to the point where the Harris campaign, one of their slogans is, we're not going back. We are moving forward. And so those are the very different messages that you are hearing from these campaigns. How are they resonating with voters? To be determined still.
Do you think that the deciding factor could very well be the American women? Because I think this debate has finally become about pro-life versus pro-choice. All right, we seem to have lost our connection with Brian, but of course, he's given you a deep insight into what this election campaigning has been like. As I was saying, we're just hours away from where United States, in fact, goes into polls. And the fact of the matter is that this is going to be one pivotal election, because remember, it will be this election which will decide the future course of the world geopolitics. I'm going to be slipping into a quick break, come right back to Race for the White House. Stay tuned to CNN News 18. Welcome back to Race for the White House, where CNN News 18 will bring you our live and rolling coverage, uninterrupted one for 100 hours as far as the US presidential election is concerned. Do tune in for all the latest updates and for insights into how this election is shaping up minute by minute. We'll keep you posted. For now, let's also break down for you how the US election actually takes place and what is so critical are the 7 battleground states. CNN News 18's Zaka Jacob, in fact, breaks down all the maths for you. Have a quick look.
It is the race for the White House. They're calling it the closest election in a generation. We'll tell you why. We'll break it down on the magic wall for you. Let's start from 8 years ago, the shock victory of Donald Trump, pipping Hillary Clinton to become the president of the US in 2016. He won with 307 electoral college votes, even though in the popular vote, Hillary Clinton got 48% of the popular vote and Donald Trump manages 47%. In fact, Hillary Clinton had 3% more popular vote, 3 million, in fact, 3 million more popular votes than Donald Trump. And yet she went on to lose because she lost some key battleground states. This was 2016, the shock result where Donald Trump came from behind and defeated Hillary Clinton despite losing the popular vote. Then in 2020, bang in the middle of COVID, after the rather tumultuous 4 years of a Trump presidency, Joe Biden, the Democratic candidate, beat Donald Trump. Donald Trump did not get a second term because Joe Biden swept both the popular vote. In fact, he had more than 50% of the popular vote, a massive difference, 51.3 and 46.9, almost a 5% gap in the popular vote. And more importantly, that 5% gap translated into 303 electoral college votes for Joe Biden and just 235 for Donald Trump. And part of how he managed to do that was by winning some of these battleground states. I'll get to that in 1 second. So 2024, why is it being predicted to be such a close, such a tight race? This is the starting point for Kamala Harris. She starts with 175 strong seats because these are states like California, Washington State, Illinois, and of course the whole bunch of states in the East Coast, all the way from Maine and New Hampshire up in the north, down to Maryland, and of course the DC area. If you were to look at some leaning constituencies, some Democrat-leaning states, you have New Mexico, Colorado, Oregon, Minnesota. Tim Walz comes from Minnesota. So that takes her to 226. So 200.
Here in Israel, the US presidential election is being closely watched, the outcome being seen as having a direct impact on this country too, which is of course fighting in Gaza and Lebanon and engaged in a spiraling confrontation with Iran. One recent opinion poll here suggests a clear majority of Israelis favor Trump over Harris to become the leader of Israel's most important ally. Trump is remembered for a series of pro-Israel moves when he was president, including moving the US embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing Israeli annexation of the Golan Heights, and taking a tougher stance on Iran. While the Biden administration, including Vice President Harris, is seen by many here as having sought to restrain Israel's tough military response in a year since the October the 7th attacks.
All right, so Donald Trump and Kamala Harris going toe and toe, and we don't know really where this will be because many are saying that there could just be a last-minute toss up as far as this entire election is concerned. It is one nail biter of a U.S. presidential election. We'll keep bringing you all the latest updates. Stay tuned to Race for the White House. We'll be back after a quick break.
For Kelly Ayotte, one for Maggie Goodlander, one for Joseph D. Kenny, one for David Roquefort, one for Arnold G. Davis, one for Kate LaBerge, one for John McCormick, one for Suzanne Collins, one for Leanne H. Rideout, one for Terry L. Peterson,
to go, and America decides its future for the next 4 years. And the choice could not have been more stark. You have the incumbent Vice President Kamala Harris hoping to make history. If she wins, she will become the first ever woman president of the United States. On the other hand, from the Republican Party, you have former President Donald Trump, who of course believes this country is broken, this country's economy is broken, and he is the man to fix it. Who will America choose between these two very, very contrasting figures? And it's not just their personalities, their politics, their policies couldn't be more stark. It's a choice that more than 150 million plus Americans will make. Mind you, 75 million of whom have already voted early. So what kind of bearing that will have on the final result, we will have to wait and see. But this is not just America's choice. Yes, it's Americans who are voting to decide who's going to be the 47th president of their country, but it has huge consequences for the rest of the world. We will take you through a special 1-hour edition through the course of the next 60 minutes. It's the Race for the White House with me, Zaka Jacob. But first, let's give you the closing arguments from both personalities, from both Vice President Harris and President Trump. What is their closing message to the voters as they're hoping that they're faithful, the base turns out in large numbers in a way that one of them wins a decisive mandate? So far, the polls have been absolutely close, neck and neck. Many are saying this could easily be the closest election in 25 years, the closest election since Bush versus Gore in the year 2000. But first, let's bring you up to speed with what the two principals have been telling their audiences, their voters, their bases as to why this election is so critical and why their respective bases need to turn up. All right, just to give you an update of where both the candidates are in this final 24 hours leading up to Election Day, which is November 5th tomorrow. In fact, Vice President Harris has 5 rallies today, all 5 of them in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. And she realizes that Pennsylvania, the biggest of the battleground states with 19 electoral college votes, it's a must win for both candidates. So all 5 of her closing rallies are in Pennsylvania. In fact, the final rally at past 11 o'clock Eastern tonight is going to have a host of Hollywood celebrities. She's going to be joined by Lady Gaga, Oprah Winfrey. Just in the last few days, you've seen her campaign with Beyonce, with Jennifer Lopez. On the other side, Donald Trump is going to be in 4 different places today. He's going to start the day in North Carolina. Then he's going to go to Pennsylvania and close out the day in Michigan. Of course, for Donald Trump, too, Pennsylvania is a must-win for either candidate because it is the biggest swing state of all the 7 that are on the ballot, that are going to polls this time around. Let's try and open this up to our panelists who are joining us. This is, as I said, the most crucial election for an entire generation of Americans. And I suspect it's not just about the direction of this country in the next 4 years. It's possibly going to be the direction that this country is headed towards for the next decade or so. Here with me, Lisa Curtis from the Center for New American Security. She's Senior Fellow and Director with the Indo-Pacific Security Program at CNAS. Ambassador Harsh Shringla is former Foreign Secretary to the Government of India. He's joining us live from New Delhi. Professor Salvatore Babonis is a sociologist who's teaching with the University of Sydney. He's joining us via Zoom. Max Abrams will be joining us, American political commentator. David Tafuri is a former foreign policy advisor to President Obama. Michael Owens is the mayor of the city of Mableton. So they are our guests who will be joining us. We'll also have a CNN reporter a little later on in the program. Lisa Curtis, let me start with you. I mean, everybody wants to know, who's going to win? Is it going to be Trump? Is it going to be back to 2016 to 2020? Or is it going to be Kamala Harris? She's making the case that this election is historic. What is your reading of what's going on?
Well, I really think this election is too close to call. It keeps going back and forth, and we see that it's going to come down to the 7 battleground states. Like you said, Pennsylvania, extremely important. And so we really don't know which way it's going to go. But because it is so close, there are a couple concerns. One concern is that one side won't accept the electoral victory of the other side. And of course, there's more concerns about this when it comes to Trump supporters. So if Harris were to win, there's concern that there would be objections by the Trump camp, there would be protests. And I think we can be rest assured that both sides are likely to challenge results at the local level, state level, so we could see, certain races going to the courts, and this could take a long time to resolve. So I think the feeling is we may not know who the victor is for weeks, maybe even months to come.
So I remember the 2020 election, which of course was in the middle of COVID. There was a record number of mail-in ballots. I think over 100 million people had voted through mail-in ballots. The result, CNN in fact called the result on Saturday morning. So Tuesday night was the election, it got concluded. And finally on Saturday morning at 11 o'clock is when they called the election. Do you think this time too, it'll take that long to call the election?
I think it likely will take at least that long to call the election.
I was hoping to go back to Delhi by then.
Well, yeah, you may want to take up
Reschedule.
camp here, but the truth is we really don't know. There could be a decisive win by one of the sides. That seems unlikely, given that up until 24 hours ahead of time, the battleground states, some of them are too close to call, including Pennsylvania. So I think what's more likely is that we'll have disputes, we'll have questions raised. And that it may even go past next Saturday in terms of not knowing who actually has won.
I do want to tell our viewers, we were at the White House, just outside the South Lawns of the White House yesterday, between the White House and the Washington Monument. And there were these big barricades, big sort of steel fences that had come up. And presumably that is because, the security agencies here don't want to take any chances as to which way this result will go. And if it is tight, as Lisa and all the polls have been suggesting, then one side might not accept. But we'll get to that. We'll pass that bridge when we get there. But let me bring in Ambassador Shringla. Ultimately for us Indians who are watching this broadcast, you might be thinking, it doesn't really matter. There is bipartisan support. I'm coming to you live from the Capitol Hill, and this has been said since at least the late 90s. That there's bipartisan support for the India-US bilateral relationship. But given what we're seeing about Shringla around this night, we had this attack in Brampton in Canada. There's also this ongoing sort of situation with the US authorities. There's a case that's going on in a court in Manhattan. Does it really make a difference who becomes the next president, Donald Trump or Kamala Harris? Even on the other issues concerning the bilateral, or is it that it doesn't make a difference who the next president? The India-US bilateral will always be.
It is that this is one of the most watched elections back here in India. And just before I joined, this session, I was talking to a few people, and they said, look, we are bombarded with news on the US elections. So there is a lot of interest in India. And clearly, we may be agnostic about the results, but we are watching it very closely. So the US elections are important for the world. It's important for India as a close partner and ally and close partner and friend of the United States. On the other hand, there are issues, as you mentioned, which are out there on the table, but those issues have always been there in one form or the other. There's always been issues. And between two countries that have such a close and comprehensive partnership, there are bound to be certain issues that come up. The important thing is to keep your eyes on the ball, to focus on the comprehensive global strategic partnership that the two countries enjoy, and to make sure that you're on track on the larger issues that matter to you. There are issues, of course, as you mentioned, which could divert attention, but actually, we should be very cognizant of the fact that we have to deal with these issues as they come up. But as I said, not lose sight of the larger issues. And coming back to your question now, I think it is important that, irrespective of who wins the elections, we have a close rapport. There is a close relationship at the level of the principals. Prime Minister Modi has had an excellent relationship with President Obama, with President Trump, with President Biden. And I'm sure he will have a great rapport with whoever becomes president of the United States following this election. So I think we will not be, diverted by these issues. And I don't think the choice of president will determine how these issues will run. I think both presidents have, both candidates have a certain, very positive corner as far as India is concerned. And we will certainly be happy to have either of them in the seat.
I want to go across to Mr. David Tafuri and then to Max Abrams and to Professor Babonis. Mr. Tafuri, one thing I noticed, and I must confess, we've been going around DC in taxis, and we do this little dipstick taxi driver survey, which is the most unscientific way of finding out who's going to win tomorrow's election. But a lot of them were saying Trump this time. Generally, what I found was the level of acceptability of Trump was far higher in 2024 than what it was in 2020, or certainly than what it was in 2016. Do you think that's a factor at play? Because, again, this is the word on the street, the common man's sort of interpretation that things are not looking as good as it was when Trump was in power, for whatever reason, economic reasons, price of groceries, whatever it is.
They started 4 years ago because of the COVID outbreak, and they haven't resumed it. But they did for a long time too. Sort of the town called Millsfield, New Hampshire. It's come out just continuously in pollution. 1916,
with President Biden, and by virtue of that, that frustration could carry over to Harris, and so they're more accepting of a potential change, even to someone like President Trump, who has lots of other reasons why you might have disdain for him as a president. I think that is certainly a factor, but there are lots of things to suggest that there's more momentum on the side of Harris, especially over the last few weeks. There's been a lot of talk about this one poll that came out from Iowa, which Iowa is not a swing state. It was supposed to be in Trump's camp. It was supposed to be solidly in Trump's camp, but it shows suddenly that Harris is leading Trump in Iowa. And that may suggest that there's something that the national polls and the swing state polls are not picking up in terms of a feeling toward Harris. I would also say that one other thing that can impact the final result is the fact that Harris has more funding. She raised more money. She's spending more on staff in the swing states. She's also spending more on TV commercials. So for those undecided voters, she's likely connecting with them more frequently than President Trump is. But as your previous guests mentioned, the polls in the swing states are so close, you really can't predict who is going to win. And even when you take a large sample size, it still turns out to be very clear and close.
You know, I just want to talk about that Iowa poll for a second. In fact, Lisa and I were talking about it before we went on the air. So this is a pollster, Jan Selzer, one of the most respected in Iowa and certainly in the United States. And like Mr. Fall said, Iowa is not a swing state. Trump won it big last time. He won it again in 2016. Barack Obama was the last Democrat to carry Iowa, and that was God knows how long ago. The interesting thing, Lisa, about the Selzer survey in Iowa was, of course, the shock value was the fact that she found that 47% for Harris and 44% for Trump. There would be an upset win if Harris carries Iowa. But the interesting data point, which I picked up, was that women were voting in very, very large numbers for Harris, and particularly white, college-educated, older women were breaking for Harris almost 3:1. If that is true, and like I said, we have no way of finding out until the elections conclude tomorrow. But if that is true, why would that be restricted just to Iowa?
Well, I think it's not surprising.
One for Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. One for Kelly Ayotte. One for Lily Tang Williams. One for Joseph D. Kenney. One for David Roquefort. One for Arnold G. Davis. One for Keith Roberge. One for John McCormick. One for Suzanne Collins. One for Leon H. Rideout. One for Terry L. Peterson. One for Ray Gorman. And another yes for the constitutional amendment question. One for, I never say her name right, I'm sorry. Kamala D. Harris. One for Tim Walz. One for Kelly Ayotte. One for Maggie Goodlander. One for Joseph D. Kenney. One for David Roquefort. One for Arnold G. Davis. One for Keith Roberge. One for John McCormick. One for Suzanne Collins. One for Leanne H. Rideout. One for Terry L. Peterson. One for Ray Gorman. And yes on the amendment question. One for Donald J. Trump and J.D. Vance. One for Kelly Ayotte. One for Maggie Goodlander. One for Joseph D. Kenney. One for David Roquefort. One for Arnold G. Davis. One for Keith L. Roberge. One for John McCormick. One for Suzanne Collins. One for Leon H. Rideout. One for Terry L. Peterson. One for Ray Gorman. And no for the constitutional amendment question. One for Kamala D. Harris Clinton Waltz, one for Joyce Craig, one for Maggie Goodlander, one for Emmett Soldati, one for Rusty Talbot, one for Arnold G. Davis, one for Keith L. Roberge, one for John McCormick, one for Suzanne Collins, one for Leon H. Rideout, one for Terry L. Peterson, one for Ray Gorman. And we have an under, is that an undervote? And one undervote. One for Kamala G. Harris, Walls, one for Kelly Ayotte, one for Maggie Goodlander, one for Joseph G. Kenny, one for David Oakport, one for Arnold G. Davis, one for Keith L. Roberge, one for John McCormick, one for Suzanne Collins, one for Leon H. Rideout, one for Terry L. Peterson, one for Ray Gorman, and yes on the amendment question.
We have the results. Yes, we do. All right, we're ready. For president, 3 for Kamala Harris, 3 for Donald Trump. Following the national trend. For governor,